My grandma was a serial killer. The metal has teeth. You feel it giving grain by grain as the screwdriver twists against the rusted lock on the leather suitcase. The wardrobe behind you smells of cedar and something older, something like the breath of a room that has not been opened in years. The lock clicks, clicks, the lid lifts, paper, leather, the smell of vinegar and dust. Inside, three things wait with the patience of objects that have outlived their keeper. Stacks of children's school photographs, faces sorted by date, smiling into a camera held by someone who knew their names. You do not recognize a single one of them. Newspaper clippings, yellowed at the edges, brittle as insect wings, about missing children from a time before you were born. And a leather diary, small enough to hide in a palm, that falls open to a page near the middle when your hand trembles. One sentence circled in faded blue ink. The third one was never found. I know where he is. You read it aloud. The children's faces stare up from the suitcase. No one was meant to open this. Where's the third child, and why did Aunt Vera keep the secret for 30 years? Aunt Vera was a retired elementary school teacher who lived alone in the same house in Callaway, Virginia for 43 years. She never married. She remembered every birthday in the family with a card in her cramped, careful handwriting, and she never talked about her own life. I am her niece. I am clearing the house after her death at 82, carrying boxes to a rental truck while her neighbors watch from porches, and I am finding what she left behind in the back of a wardrobe. Callaway remembers three children who disappeared between 1983 and 1987. Two came back in their own ways. One was recovered alive after a kidnapping that made the Richmond papers for a week. One was found in a creek bed 3 months after vanishing, his red jacket snagged on a branch half a mile downstream, his body bloated with water and time. The third was Daniel Marsh, 7 years old, vanished in 1986 from the school playground during a carnival, never found. The case went cold before I was born, and I grew up hearing his name only as a caution, a story mothers told to keep children close at the grocery store. Vera was a teacher, not a suspect. She was family, not a witness. I never questioned this until the suitcase. The diary's early pages are ordinary, almost cruel in their ordinariness. Lesson plans for second-grade reading circles. Notes about rain that would not stop in March of 1983. Observations about children who were quiet, children who were not. The small weathers of a classroom. Then the tone shifts like a bone snapping under weight. She writes about Carl Pruitt, a youth pastor at the First Baptist Church who volunteered at her school on Thursday afternoons. She describes bruises on a girl named Patricia, the yellow-green of them visible above her socks. She describes the way Carl's voice made children go still, the way his hand on his shoulder was not a comfort but a holding. In 1984, she went to the Callaway police. They told her there was no evidence. They told her Carl was a respected man. They told her to be careful about making accusations that could ruin a life. Then, the night of October 17, 1986, Vera followed Carl from the school parking lot after the carnival ended. She watched him take Daniel Marsh by the hand and lead him to an old well house on the Mercer property at the edge of town, where the street lights ended and the woods began. She was alone. She was afraid. By the time she drove to a phone booth and called the police, Carl was gone. They searched the area. They found nothing. The third one was never found. I know where he is. She meant the well house. She believed Daniel was there. She was never believed. I cross-reference every date in the diary with the newspaper clippings. Every name matches. Every detail in her cramped handwriting appears in the public record, but twisted, flattened, made smaller than it was. The police reports do not mention Carl Pruitt. The newspaper stories do not mention a teacher who tried to warn them. I search for Carl Pruitt. He left Callaway in 1989, moving to Knoxville with a new wife and a new church. He was investigated for child abuse in 1995. He died in a state prison in 2004, alone, of liver failure, with no visitors in his final 6 months. I find the Mercer property on a satellite map, the well house still standing on land that has been abandoned since the family moved west in 1991. I call the original investigating officer, now retired, who answers his phone with the gravel of a man who has outlived his career. He admits, over the static of a bad connection, that they never seriously considered Pruitt. He was a church man, he says. People trusted him. I face a choice. Drive to the well house myself, or take the diary to the state police. I choose the police. I also called the Marsh family. Daniel's mother is still alive, still in Callaway, still waiting in the same house on Birch Street where she was living when her son disappeared. She answers the phone with a voice that sounds like has been waiting for this call for 30 years. I bring the diary to a cold case detective named Rivera. She reads the circled sentence. She looks at me and she says, Let's go find out if she was right. Behind a collapsed stone wall in the cellar of the well house, they find human remains consistent with a child of 7. The small bones are wrapped in a plastic turp with askews to the rib cage in places that is preserved enough for dental records to speak across 30 years. It is Daniel Marsh. The diary's final entries span 2 decades. Vera wrote letters to the police she never sent, stacking them in a drawer beneath her socks. Every November, on the anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, she drove to the Mercer property and sat in her car at the edge of the woods, unable to walk to the well house, unable to drive away. After Carl died in 2004, she wrote, "He can't hurt anyone now. But what good does the truth do if it only opens a grave?" She never told anyone. She carried it alone until she died. What was won? Daniel Marsh was finally laid to rest 41 years after he disappeared, buried beside his father in the Callaway Cemetery, his name added to the stone. His mother, 83, touched the coffin with both hands and said, "Hos, he may come home." What was lost? Vera died without anyone knowing what she carried, and I must now live with the knowledge that every act of kindness she showed to her children in her later years was not just generosity. It was penance for one night she could not forgive herself for, a silence that became its own punishment. Daniel Marsh was finally laid to rest 41 years after he disappeared. If you know a family still waiting for that kind of closure, share their case. Silence is the only thing that lets old crimes stay buried.